This is part 2 of the air transportation analysis spreadsheet. But first, let's review what we did in part 1 under the aircraft average cost per hour tab. We have 3 tabs, 1, 2, 3. Tabs 2 and 3 are going to be the flight history, and tab 1 is our analysis, establishing a baseline dollar amount. We looked at different aircraft features like fuel consumption per hour and seat capacity and determined how airplane characteristics affected their operational costs. We also talked about the fact that manufacturers produce their own projected dollar amount, but in order to be accurate, we wanted to take our own analysis and determine what it would cost at various situations. If we had $5 per gallon, $6 per gallon, and $7 per gallon. Now, this is not rocket science. We do the same calculations when we purchase automobiles. Do we purchase a gas-guzzling car or a fuel-efficient car? Your purchase depends on how you will utilize the automobile. The only difference between cars and planes is we calculate fuel consumption with cars in miles per gallon. With airplanes, it is hours. We're going to look at how many gallons per hour a particular airplane uses in 1 hour of flight. In tab 1, we multiplied the cost of a gallon of fuel, we'll start with $5, by the hourly consumption, and for the Cessna Citation, it was 200 gallons per hour. 200 times 5 gave us 1,000, and that gave us the average fuel cost per hour of each particular aircraft. Then we multiplied average fuel cost per hour by average flight time per trip. We also determined that the average trip was 5 hours, 2.5 hours from Orlando to the facilities, and another 2.5 hours to return to Orlando, totaling 5 hours. We now took the average fuel cost per hour at $5, multiply it by the average flight time per trip, and we got average operating costs per trip at $5 per gallon for each aircraft. We then took the average operating cost per trip and divided it by passenger capacity of each aircraft. We got the average cost per passenger at full capacity. Average costs per passenger at full capacity allows us to see which plane was more expensive or least expensive at full capacity. We assigned a cost to each seat. It is better to fly at full capacity to lower the cost. For example, if you commute to work in your car with coworkers and everyone paid for fuel, then it is much less expensive if you had more people in the car. The same applies to aircraft. However, this is a problem with business aircraft. A fully owned corporate jet has a different mission than a revenue-based airline. Corporate jet is rarely at full capacity. Analyzing the mission objective and related cost must be compared to the company's flight history. This is the objective in tabs 2 and 3. So in part 2, we are reviewing the company's annual history, both charter and commercial airline flight. The ultimate goal is to see which aircraft structure, either charter, fractional ownership, or full ownership, and which aircraft type would be the best fit for Aegis systems. It is possible that the status quo could remain the same, so that's what we're trying to determine. So when we look at the record keeping for on-demand flight history, we look at the date, we look at the employee, the department that employee is associated with, because we use chargebacks to track the cost per department. We talk about the departure, which is going to be always from headquarters, Orlando, Florida. We have facilities in Peoria, Illinois, Fort Wayne, and Springfield, Missouri. And then we also have returning back to Orlando. So we divide up the route in basically 4 different categories. And we also look at flight hours, because that's the most important data that we need in order to get an accurate operating cost per airplane. And the airline is going to be the third, flight history. So let's start totaling the columns and analyzing the flight history. We can perform the analysis with basic Excel functions. The first function we're going to use is the equal sum function. So we're going to go to the bottom of the spreadsheet and we're going to look at total flight hours. As you can see in the formula bar, we have equal sum column H, cell 6 through H, cell 73. I'm going to delete that, and we're going to enter it in physically. We'll start with the equal sign. We'll go up to the formula bar. You can either enter the function in the formula bar or in the cell. I always like to choose the formula bar. We'll start to write the word sum. The function comes up automatically in the pull-down menu. We'll choose that. It has the open parentheses. Now we have to put the cell range. We want that sum to calculate everything in column H. We simply click and drag to the very end. The function gives us the range, H6 through H73, and all we have to do is close parentheses and click the green check mark, and it gives us 515 hours of annual flight time that was spent on charters. Now, total expense is not just the airplane. There are times that employees have to remain in that location. They'll have per diem for meals and a hotel for overnight stays. That's all been recorded, and the same sum function will be used to calculate each column. Okay, now it's your turn to practice. Pause the video and enter the equal sum function in the three columns, column H, I, and J, with cell rows between 6 and 73. We'll look at the totals once you perform this function. Now that we have these totals, we can continue. Another small spreadsheet that analyzes how many trips did we take from Orlando to Peoria and back to Orlando. How many trips from Orlando to Fort Wayne, back to Orlando. How many trips from Orlando to Springfield, Missouri, and multiple locations where you go from Orlando to Peoria to Fort Wayne and then back to Orlando in one day. So now we're going to have to utilize the count if function. So how many trips did we go to Peoria? We'll start with, again, the equal sign, telling Excel that it is a formula. We will type in the word count, and the count if function is offered in the pull-down menu. Now we must identify the cell range that will determine the number of flights taken to each facility location, which is in column E. Now, in order to lock the cells in place, we're going to add what they call relative referencing. And in order to do that, we put a $ in front of the letter, column letter, and the cell number. Next, we have to tell Excel, what are we looking for? What are we counting in that cell range? We're going to put a comma, and we'll have to type out the IKO acronym for Peoria. Now remember, every time we use letters in a formula, we have to put it in quotation marks. The IKO acronym is Papa India Alpha with close quotation marks and then close parentheses. We will click the green check mark and see if it gives us a number. It gives us 27. So we took 27 flights to Peoria, back to Orlando. We're going to do the exact same function in the next cell, indicating from Orlando to Fort Wayne, back to Orlando again. So it's equal. We'll put the word count. This time we're doing it from the cell. We want to utilize the same cell range, which is going to be column E6 down to E73. We can tell it what is the IKO designation for Fort Wayne. It again is letters, so we have to start with a quotation mark. It's going to be Foxtrot Whiskey Alpha, end quotation mark, and close it with the parentheses. Hit the check mark, green check mark, and it says 25. Now, if you notice, we had $ in the first one to lock the columns and cells in place. We'll need to do the same here. We'll just edit it right in the formula bar. We'll put the $ in front of the column, another $ in front of the cell, and then we will go to the next half of the formula and lock all that in and hit the check mark, 25. Now you will continue the same procedure to determine the number of flights to Springfield, Missouri. However, flight routes with 2 facility locations and then returning to Orlando will have a different cell range. That cell range will be in column G. If you notice, it indicates Orlando as the final destination after 2 stops at different facilities. So we have 3 legs totaling approximately 10 hours. Flight hours will increase, and per diem charges and the hotels because of the length of time it took to perform that particular mission. Next, we will move on to the airline flight history for Aegis systems.